You think you own this neighborhood, Logan, but you do not own the rules. Vanessa Caldwell snapped as she slammed a $50,000 HOA demand onto the table during a packed meeting in rural Tennessee. Everyone stared at Logan Whitaker, a 58-year-old retired engineer who owned a private dam behind his property. Vanessa smiled as neighbors whispered that he was finally getting what he deserved. What nobody knew was that the small dam was quietly protecting hundreds of acres around the lake. Logan went home, sat on his porch, and reread the notice. Then he called his attorney. A few hours later, he learned something shocking. The HOA had no authority over the dam. It sat completely outside HOA jurisdiction. Vanessa either did not know that, or she did not care. Logan made a decision. If the HOA wanted the dam gone so badly, he would stop maintaining it and begin the legal process to remove the private structure from his property. The next morning, contractors arrived. Residents driving by slowed down and watched. By noon, panic started spreading through the neighborhood. Homeowners discovered that without the dam, future storm water management plans for the community would have to be completely redesigned. Insurance questions started appearing. Property value concerns exploded across social media. Then another secret surfaced. Vanessa had been meeting with a developer who wanted to build luxury waterfront docks. The dam stood in the way of the project. Suddenly, the story changed. Logan was no longer the villain. Vanessa was. Neighbors who had mocked him now demanded answers. Board members began distancing themselves from her. One even admitted that legal warnings had been ignored months earlier. Within weeks, the HOA withdrew the demand. Vanessa lost her leadership position. The development deal quietly disappeared. One calm morning, Logan stood beside the lake watching fog roll across the water. For the first time in months, nobody was threatening him. Nobody was questioning him. But as he looked toward the far shoreline, he noticed survey stakes sticking out of the ground near a different section of land. Someone new had started asking questions about the lake, and this time the problem might be even bigger. You are the most selfish man in this county, Logan, and I am finally going to make everyone see it. Vanessa Caldwell's voice cracked through the HOA meeting room just as thunder rolled across the lake outside. Rain hammered the metal roof overhead. 80 homeowners sat frozen in their chairs while she held a bright red notice above her head like a trophy. $50,000, she announced. That is what your little dam is going to cost you. A few people laughed. Others nodded. Most simply stared at Logan Whitaker as if he had already lost. Logan did not move. He sat quietly at the end of the table with both hands resting on a worn coffee thermos. Through the windows behind Vanessa, he could see fog hanging over the water and the dark outline of the shoreline beyond. If you have ever seen somebody abuse a little bit of authority and instantly regret it later, comment below with your state and let me know where you are watching from, because this story only gets stranger from here. Vanessa dropped the notice onto the table. The paper slid across the polished surface and stopped inches from Logan. You have 30 days, she said. After that, we will take additional action. The room became silent. Not supportive silence. Curious silence. The kind people fall into when they expect a fight. Instead, Logan simply looked down at the notice and then back at Vanessa. Do you really want to do this? He asked. The question sounded calm. Respectful even. That irritated her more than an argument would have. That is not your decision anymore, she replied. Several homeowners smiled. Vanessa smiled too. She believed she had complete control of the room. What she did not know was that 3 days earlier, a retired hydrology consultant had stopped by Logan's property. The man had spent 2 hours studying old watershed maps and engineering records. Before leaving, he had said something that kept replaying in Logan's mind. Most of these people have no idea what that dam actually does. Outside the meeting hall, rainwater flowed down gravel driveways and collected near the fishing docks. Lake wind pushed waves against the muddy shoreline. The entire community sat beside infrastructure most residents never thought about. Infrastructure that quietly protected property, controlled runoff, and managed seasonal water pressure. Vanessa continued speaking. She listed violations, safety concerns, community standards, property value complaints. Each statement sounded polished, practiced, yet several board members avoided eye contact while she spoke. One man shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Another stared at his phone. Tiny cracks, barely visible, but Logan noticed them. Years of engineering work had taught him that collapses rarely begin with dramatic failures. They begin with small signs people ignore. When the meeting finally ended, residents gathered beneath the covered entrance while rain continued falling. Conversations spread through the crowd. Some blamed Logan. Others questioned the size of the fine. Vanessa moved confidently between groups, accepting support and reassurance. She looked like someone celebrating a victory. Logan walked alone toward his pickup truck parked near the edge of the lot. Cold morning air mixed with the smell of wet cedar and lake water. Just as he opened the driver's door, his phone vibrated. The message came from an attorney he trusted. It contained only one sentence. "Call me immediately. The HOA may have a much bigger problem than you do." Logan looked back toward the community center where Vanessa was still smiling beneath the lights. Then he glanced toward the fog over the lake and realized this fight was about to become something entirely different. Logan sat in his pickup truck for nearly a minute after reading the attorney's message. Rain slid down the windshield while the parking lot slowly emptied behind him. Vanessa was still standing beneath the covered entrance, surrounded by homeowners who treated her like she had just saved the neighborhood. The sight stirred something uncomfortable inside him. Not anger, disappointment. He had spent 20 years helping maintain the lake system that protected those same homes, and now many of those people were applauding a woman who did not even understand what she was threatening. He started the engine and drove home along narrow county roads lined with wet cedar and low fog. Lake wind pushed across the water beside the road, carrying the smell of mud and rain through a cracked window. By the time he reached his gravel driveway, the attorney was already calling. "Logan, I reviewed the notice." And silence filled the line for a second. The HOA may have crossed a line they cannot uncross. Logan walked toward the shoreline while listening. The dam sat quietly at the far end of the property, surrounded by dark water and thick mist. It looked ordinary. That was the problem. People only noticed infrastructure when it stopped working. "Their authority appears questionable," the attorney continued. "Very questionable." Logan stared across the fog-covered lake. "Are you telling me they do not have jurisdiction?" "I am telling you I want to verify a few things before I say that officially." The call ended, but the feeling remained. For the first time since the meeting, the pressure shifted slightly. Not away from him, just away from certainty. The next morning arrived cold and gray. Fog floated over the water while rain tapped softly against the metal roof of the maintenance shed near the fishing docks. Logan carried a coffee thermos down to the shoreline and stood beside the structure his father had spent years caring for. Memories surfaced unexpectedly. Early mornings, flood seasons, emergency repairs, long weekends spent protecting property that most residents never realized depended on this place. He suddenly felt exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Vanessa had not just attacked a piece of infrastructure. She had attacked a legacy. Before noon, he stopped at a small diner near the county highway. The place was usually noisy. That day it felt different. Several residents from the HOA were already inside. One couple lowered their voices when he entered. Another man looked away entirely. Gossip was moving faster than facts. Logan ordered coffee and sat near the window. Rain rolled down the glass while pickup trucks filled the lot outside. Halfway through his meal, an older man approached his table. Logan recognized him immediately. Harold Pierce, a retired hydrology consultant who had worked on watershed projects throughout the region. "Mind if I sit?" Harold asked. Logan nodded. Harold lowered himself into the booth and placed a worn folder on the table. "I watched the meeting online." Logan sighed. "Then you saw the circus." Harold ignored the comment. "Do those people understand what that dam actually does?" "Not really." Harold opened the folder. Inside were old maps and engineering diagrams. "That is what worries me." Logan leaned forward. The diagrams showed drainage patterns extending far beyond his property, much farther than he expected. Harold tapped one section with his finger. "Most homeowners think the lake is the story." He looked directly at Logan. "The lake is not the story." A chill moved through Logan despite the warm coffee. "Then what is?" Harold leaned back. "The runoff system." Outside, thunder rolled across the lake. Inside the diner, conversation seemed quieter than before. Harold explained that the dam interacted with a much larger water management system affecting multiple sections of land surrounding the community. Not just Logan's property, not just the lakefront homes, a much larger area. The realization landed heavily. The conflict was already bigger than anyone thought. Then Harold said something that made Logan forget his coffee entirely. "You should know something else." Logan waited. Harold glanced around the diner before lowering his voice. A few years ago, somebody tried to push a development project through that area. Logan frowned. What happened? Harold closed the folder. The dam became a problem for them. For the first time, Vanessa's actions started forming a pattern. And suddenly the $50,000 demand felt less like enforcement and more like the opening move of something much larger. Logan left the diner with Harold's folder sitting on the passenger seat beside him. Rain continued falling across the county in slow gray sheets while fog drifted over the water like something alive. The drive back to the lake felt different from the drive home after the HOA meeting. Back then he had been defending himself. Now he was starting to ask a different question. Why had Vanessa chosen this fight in the first place? The answer refused to leave his mind. The dam became a problem for them. Those words followed him all the way down the gravel driveway leading to his property. By late afternoon, the rain had eased, but heavy clouds remained over the lake. Logan walked down toward the shoreline carrying the old folder. Wet cedar branches hung low above the muddy path. The dam stood exactly where it always had. Quiet, unremarkable, essential. He sat on a weathered bench near the fishing docks and began studying the maps. Several drainage routes crossed land far beyond HOA boundaries. Water management zones connected multiple parcels owned by different parties. The farther he looked, the less sense Vanessa's campaign made. If she had truly believed the structure was dangerous, why had nobody raised concerns during the previous decade? His phone buzzed. It was a message from a homeowner named Carol Benson. She had publicly supported Vanessa during the meeting. The message was short. Is it true the dam helps control runoff outside the neighborhood? Logan stared at the screen for a moment before replying. Yes. Why? The response came almost immediately. Because people are talking. That evening, Lake Briar felt different. Residents gathered in driveways. Pickup trucks stopped longer at intersections. Conversations lingered beside mailboxes. The gossip had evolved. At first, people discussed the fine. Now they were discussing the reason behind the fine. That shift mattered. Questions are dangerous when somebody is hiding something. Around 7 o'clock, another surprise arrived. Logan received an email from a former HOA board member who had moved away 2 years earlier. Attached was a photograph from an old planning meeting. Vanessa stood beside several unfamiliar men reviewing large development renderings. The image itself proved nothing, but the timestamp caught his attention. The meeting had taken place months before Vanessa ever mentioned concerns about the dam. Logan felt a quiet wave of anger. Not explosive anger. The kind that settles deep and stays there. He had spent weeks being portrayed as selfish, while someone else appeared to be working from a script nobody could see. The next morning brought more social pressure. Logan stopped at the local hardware store and immediately felt dozens of eyes on him. Some people avoided eye contact. Others watched openly. One resident approached near the checkout counter. Did you really get hit with $50,000? Logan nodded. The man shook his head. That sounds excessive. Small comment. Big change. 3 days earlier, nobody questioned Vanessa. Now residents were questioning her decisions without being prompted. Later that afternoon, Vanessa made her move. A new HOA newsletter appeared online. The headline described the dam as a threat to community interests. The language sounded polished, professional, but something about it felt rushed. Defensive. She repeatedly emphasized authority, compliance, enforcement. She never mentioned engineering, never mentioned runoff, never mentioned infrastructure. By sunset, screenshots of the newsletter were circulating across neighborhood groups. Homeowners started comparing statements. Some noticed inconsistencies. Others began asking where the information came from. Vanessa responded to several comments personally. Certain individuals are spreading confusion. The board has everything under control. Trust the process. Yet every response seemed to generate more questions. The pressure was no longer flowing toward Logan. It was slowly beginning to flow back toward her. As darkness settled over the lake, thunder rolled in the distance and wind pushed across the water. Logan sat on his porch holding a coffee thermos while watching fog gather over the shoreline. He felt tired. He felt uncertain. But for the first time since the public humiliation at the HOA meeting, he also felt something else. Momentum. Then his phone rang. It was his attorney again. This time her voice carried a different tone. Logan, I found something. He stood immediately. What kind of something? A brief pause followed. The HOA received a legal warning about the dam months before they fined you. Logan remained standing on the porch long after the call ended. The fog over the lake seemed thicker than before. Wind pushed across the water and rattled loose cedar branches near the shoreline. Somewhere beyond the fishing docks, thunder rolled through the darkness. A legal warning. Months before the fine. He replayed those words over and over. What unsettled him most was not the warning itself. It was what it implied. Vanessa had stood in front of an entire community and spoken with absolute confidence. Either she never read the warning, which seemed unlikely, or she knew exactly what it said and moved forward anyway. Neither possibility reflected well on her. The next morning began with cold air and steady rain. Logan drove into town before sunrise and met his attorney at a small office near the county courthouse. Water streamed down the windows while courthouse employees hurried across the square carrying umbrellas and coffee cups. The atmosphere felt heavy, focused, almost surgical. His attorney placed a folder on the table and slowly pushed it toward him. This came from a former consultant who worked with the association. Logan opened the folder. The warning was real. Months earlier, an attorney advising the HOA had cautioned the board that the dam sat outside HOA authority and that enforcement actions could expose the association to unnecessary legal risk. Logan read the paragraph twice. Then a third time. Did Vanessa receive this? He asked. According to the distribution list, yes. The room became quiet except for rain tapping against the glass. Logan felt a flash of anger followed immediately by something more useful. Clarity. The conflict was changing shape. He was no longer fighting assumptions. He was beginning to uncover decisions. Outside the courthouse, people moved through puddles while gray clouds pressed low against the skyline. Back in Lake Briar, the social atmosphere continued shifting. Homeowners who had once avoided him were now asking questions. A retired couple stopped him outside the hardware store. A man fueling his pickup truck asked whether the fine was still active. Someone left a handwritten note in his mailbox that simply read, "Something feels wrong." The community was not defending him yet, but they were no longer blindly defending Vanessa either. That afternoon, Vanessa launched another newsletter. The tone was noticeably sharper. She accused unnamed individuals of spreading misinformation and undermining community trust. She repeated phrases like compliance, governance, and responsibility. Yet she never addressed the warning. She never addressed the maps. She never addressed the growing questions. Residents noticed. Comments began appearing beneath shared screenshots. Some asked why legal concerns had been ignored. Others asked whether board members had received the same documents. One question appeared repeatedly. Why was everyone learning this now? By evening, the newsletter had become its own problem. Instead of ending discussion, it amplified it. Logan watched the reactions unfold from a booth inside the diner near the lake. The place was unusually quiet. Conversations dropped when certain names were mentioned. People glanced toward one another before speaking. Gossip had matured into scrutiny. Even more surprising, two current board members entered together, ordered coffee, and sat in the corner without acknowledging anyone. Their body language looked tense, defensive. They stayed less than 15 minutes before leaving. As rain drummed against the metal awning outside, Harold Pierce slid into the seat across from Logan again. This time he carried no folder. "You saw the newsletter?" Harold asked. Logan nodded. Harold looked toward the window. "Then she is worried." Logan considered that. Vanessa had always projected certainty. The newsletter felt different. Less confident. More reactive. More personal. "I think she expected everyone to stop asking questions," Logan said. Harold gave a slow nod. "People usually do." The statement lingered between them. Outside, headlights reflected across wet pavement and fog drifted through the parking lot. Then Harold lowered his voice. "There is one more thing." Logan immediately recognized the tone. Another piece of the puzzle. Another crack in the foundation. "What is it?" Harold looked directly at him. The development company did not approach Vanessa. Logan frowned. "Then who approached who?" Harold's expression darkened. "From what I heard, she approached them first." Logan barely slept that night. Rain drifted across the lake in uneven waves while fog pressed against the shoreline like a curtain that refused to lift. Harold's last statement kept replaying in his head. Vanessa approached them first. Until now, every discovery had raised questions. This one pointed toward motive. Long before the fine, long before the newsletters, long before the public humiliation, she had already been moving pieces across the board. By sunrise, Cold morning air rolled across the property. Logan carried a coffee thermos down to the fishing docks and stood looking over the water. The dam sat quiet beneath the gray sky. For years he had viewed it as a responsibility. Lately it felt more like evidence. His phone rang just after 8. It was Carol Benson. Her voice sounded nervous. "I probably should not be calling." "Then why are you?" Logan asked. A pause followed. "Because people are talking about a meeting." Logan looked across the lake. "What meeting?" "A private one. Vanessa invited several homeowners. No board announcement. No public notice." The call ended with more questions than answers. Yet the social atmosphere around Lake Briar was clearly changing again. Residents who once repeated Vanessa's talking points were now quietly comparing information. By late morning, Logan drove into town. The diner near the county highway was crowded, but conversations softened when he walked through the door. Not hostile this time. Curious. A few people nodded. One man actually offered him a seat. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Public opinion was moving. While waiting for coffee, Logan noticed 2 current board members sitting together near the back wall. They stopped talking when they saw him. 10 minutes later, one of them approached his table. His name was Greg Turner. He looked exhausted. "Can I ask you something?" Logan nodded. Greg lowered his voice. "If somebody knowingly withheld legal advice from the board, would that matter?" Logan studied him carefully. "You already know the answer." Greg looked down at the floor. That response told Logan more than any document could have. The board was no longer united. Cracks were spreading internally. Outside, rain tapped against the diner windows while pickup trucks rolled through puddles in the parking lot. The tension felt different now. Less like conflict, more like anticipation. By afternoon, another piece surfaced. Logan's attorney forwarded a chain of communications involving the development company. Most of it was routine. Scheduling discussions, planning concepts, property evaluations. One detail stood out. Vanessa's name appeared repeatedly months before any official HOA concerns regarding the dam existed. Not after. Before. Logan stared at the dates. The timeline was impossible to ignore. For the first time, he felt genuine anger break through the exhaustion. He thought about the meeting, the accusations, the laughter, the people who believed he was threatening the community. Meanwhile, the person leading the attack appeared to have been building relationships behind closed doors long before the public ever heard a word about safety concerns. That evening, Vanessa released another statement online. Her tone had changed again. More defensive, more personal. She accused unnamed individuals of weaponizing misinformation. She claimed critics were undermining neighborhood stability. Yet residents immediately pushed back. Several asked direct questions about the development company. Others wanted explanations for the legal warning. One homeowner posted a simple comment. "If everything is legitimate, why is nobody getting straight answers?" The comment spread faster than the statement itself. As darkness settled over Lake Briar, Logan sat on his porch listening to rain strike the metal roof of the maintenance shed near the shoreline. Wind moved through the wet cedar trees. Across the water, distant lights reflected through the fog. His phone buzzed with a new message from his attorney. This one contained a single attachment and 6 words. "You need to see page 7. Logan opened the file. Halfway down the page was a note from an earlier planning discussion. He read it once, then again, then a third time. The development proposal specifically identified the dam as an obstacle that would likely need to be removed before future expansion could move forward. Suddenly, the entire story snapped into focus. And for the first time since Vanessa had publicly targeted him, Logan knew exactly where this fight was heading. Logan sat on the porch for a long time after reading page 7. Rain moved steadily across the lake while fog drifted low over the water. The development proposal had not simply mentioned the dam. It had identified the structure as an obstacle. An obstacle. The same word appeared 3 separate times. For weeks, Vanessa had framed the issue as safety, responsibility, community protection. Yet buried inside planning discussions, the dam was being described as a barrier to expansion. Logan felt the last pieces finally lock into place. The anger was still there, but something had changed. The frustration that had followed him since the HOA meeting began giving way to focus. He was done reacting. The next move would be his. The following morning brought cold air, gray skies, and courthouse rain. Logan met his attorney before sunrise in a conference room overlooking the county square. Water rolled down tall windows while government employees crossed the street carrying folders beneath umbrellas. His attorney spread several documents across the table. "We need to stop thinking about this as a fine dispute," she said. Logan nodded. "What is it?" She tapped the paperwork. "It is a liability issue now." The conversation shifted immediately. For the first time, they were not discussing what Vanessa had done to Logan. They were discussing what Vanessa may have exposed the HOA to. The legal warning, the development communications, the jurisdiction concerns, the timeline. Separately, each item raised questions. Together, they formed a pattern. His attorney prepared a series of formal notices. One went to HOA counsel. Another went to the HOA insurance carrier. A third requested preservation of records relating to decisions involving the dam. No accusations. No threats. Just documentation. Professional. Precise. Logan watched her work and realized something important. Vanessa had built her campaign on public pressure. The response would come through process. By noon, the first reactions began appearing. One board member contacted HOA counsel asking whether individual directors should seek separate legal advice. Another requested clarification regarding earlier discussions involving the development company. Small movements. Significant implications. Inside the board, uncertainty was spreading. Outside, social pressure continued building. Logan stopped by the diner for lunch and immediately sensed the difference. Conversations no longer stopped when he entered. In fact, several residents openly greeted him. A retired contractor waved him over. A woman who had supported the fine during the first meeting quietly apologized for assuming the worst. The atmosphere felt less hostile and more unsettled. People were beginning to understand they had not been given the full story. Meanwhile, Vanessa launched another offensive. That evening, she posted a lengthy statement accusing unnamed parties of creating unnecessary legal confusion. Her language sounded polished, but the confidence from earlier weeks was fading. She emphasized authority repeatedly. She spoke about protecting community standards. She warned residents against speculation. Yet she never addressed the development proposal. Never addressed the warning. Never addressed why legal concerns had apparently been ignored. The omissions were becoming more visible than the statements themselves. Around sunset, Logan received a call from Greg Turner. The board member sounded nervous. "I should probably not be calling you either." Logan looked out toward the muddy shoreline where lake wind pushed small waves against the rocks. "A lot of people seem to be saying that lately." Greg managed a weak laugh. Then his voice lowered. "The board never saw some of the documents you were talking about." Logan sat upright. "What do you mean?" Silence followed. "Long enough to matter. I mean exactly what I said." The line went quiet again. Procedural concerns suddenly became something more serious. Not because anyone had proven wrongdoing. Because the possibility now existed that critical information had not been shared equally with the people responsible for making decisions. As darkness settled over Lake Briar, rain tapped against metal roofs throughout the neighborhood. Residents exchanged screenshots. Rumors moved through community groups. Questions multiplied. And for the first time since Vanessa publicly targeted him, Logan could feel fear shifting direction. Then his attorney sent one final message before midnight. The insurance carrier had acknowledged receipt of the preservation notice. That single confirmation changed the atmosphere completely. Because once insurance companies start paying attention, everyone else usually does too. The insurance acknowledgement changed the atmosphere in Lake Briar faster than any rumor ever could. People who had ignored the conflict suddenly paid attention. Homeowners who never attended HOA meetings started asking questions. Conversations spread from fishing docks to grocery store aisles, from gravel driveways to booths inside the diner near the county highway. The issue was no longer whether Logan had violated a rule. The issue had become whether the community had been led into a legal mess without knowing it. 2 mornings later, Logan walked into the diner just after sunrise. Cold air followed him through the door. Rain drifted across the parking lot outside while pickup trucks sat beneath low gray clouds. Something felt different immediately. Nobody stopped talking when he entered. Nobody avoided eye contact. In fact, several people nodded in his direction. One homeowner even stood and offered him a seat near the window. The emotional shift caught him off guard. Weeks earlier, he had been the villain. Now residents were beginning to view him as the person who had been warning them all along. Across town, Vanessa was experiencing the opposite transition. The same morning, she entered the diner 20 minutes later. The room did not become hostile. It became quiet. A different kind of pressure. Conversations paused. Several people suddenly focused on their coffee cups. Others looked away entirely. Nobody invited her to sit down. Nobody approached to offer support. Social authority rarely disappears all at once. It fades through moments exactly like that. Vanessa stood near the counter for nearly a minute before ordering coffee and leaving. 3 residents watched her go. Nobody followed. By afternoon, screenshots of older HOA communications were circulating online. Residents began comparing dates, comparing statements, comparing promises. Questions multiplied. Why was the legal warning never discussed publicly? Why did development conversations begin before safety concerns appeared? Why were board members now seeking independent legal advice? Every question weakened Vanessa's position further. That evening, an HOA gathering was held at the community center. Rain tapped steadily against the roof while fog pressed against the windows overlooking the lake. The room filled quickly. Homeowners arrived early, not because they wanted updates, because they wanted answers. Vanessa stepped to the front carrying prepared remarks. Her posture remained polished, but something had changed. The effortless confidence from the first meeting was gone. Certain individuals continue spreading confusion, she began. The board remains committed to responsible governance. A homeowner interrupted before she finished. Did you know about the legal warning? The room fell silent. Vanessa attempted to redirect. That is not the issue tonight. Another resident spoke. Then what is the issue? A third asked about the development company. A fourth questioned why information appeared to have been withheld from portions of the board. For the first time since this conflict began, Vanessa was not controlling the conversation. She was chasing it. Logan sat quietly near the back. He did not speak. He did not need to. The facts were doing the work. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One refused to look at Vanessa entirely. Another appeared visibly frustrated. The fractures were no longer private. Everyone could see them. Outside, thunder rolled across the lake while wind pushed rain against the building. Inside, Vanessa's social authority continued collapsing in real time. After the meeting ended, groups formed throughout the parking lot. Residents compared notes beneath umbrellas. People who once defended Vanessa openly questioned her leadership. Others wondered how much more had not been disclosed. Walking toward his truck, Logan noticed something he had never seen before. Vanessa was standing alone beneath the entrance lights. No supporters, no allies, no board members beside her. Just silence. Then Greg Turner hurried across the lot and caught up with Logan. His face looked pale. You need to know this, he said quietly. The board just discovered there were meeting records we never received. Logan stopped walking. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the roof nearby. What kind of records? Greg looked back toward the building where Vanessa remained isolated beneath the lights. The kind that could change everything. Greg's words followed Logan all the way home through the rain. Meeting records we never received. The statement sounded simple, yet it carried enormous weight. By the time he pulled into his gravel driveway, fog had swallowed most of the shoreline. The fishing docks barely remained visible through the gray haze drifting across the lake. Wind pushed small waves against the muddy bank while distant thunder echoed over the water. Everything felt suspended, waiting. The next morning began before sunrise. Logan's attorney called just after 6. Her voice was controlled, but he immediately sensed urgency beneath it. The records Greg mentioned are real. Logan sat upright. What do they show? They show discussions the full board apparently never reviewed. Silence followed. Then she added something even more significant. And they referenced the legal warning directly. Logan stared through the window toward the lake. For weeks the story had been built on suspicion. Now pieces were becoming evidence. Later that morning, county vehicles arrived at the HOA management office. Nothing dramatic happened. No confrontation. No public announcement. Yet the effect spread through Lake Briar within hours. Residents watched from parking lots. Homeowners exchanged messages. Questions turned into concern. Concern turned into anxiety. For the first time, outside authorities were visibly involved. At the diner, conversations focused on only one topic. Nobody discussed landscaping violations anymore. Nobody cared about community newsletters. People wanted to know why county officials were reviewing records. Logan noticed another shift. Residents no longer whispered when Vanessa's name came up. They spoke openly. One retired homeowner shook his head while stirring coffee. This should have been disclosed months ago. Nobody disagreed. Meanwhile, Vanessa attempted to regain control. An emergency HOA meeting was announced for that evening. Her message described the situation as routine administrative review. The wording sounded polished, reassuring, yet the reaction was noticeably different from earlier weeks. Homeowners responded with skepticism instead of trust. By sunset, the community center was packed. Rain hammered the metal roof overhead, while fog pressed against the windows facing the lake. Every seat was filled. Board members sat quietly near the front. Several appeared exhausted. Greg avoided looking toward Vanessa entirely. Logan took a seat near the back and waited. The atmosphere felt less like a neighborhood meeting and more like a courtroom before proceedings began. Vanessa stepped forward and adjusted the microphone. "There has been unnecessary speculation," she began. "The association remains fully committed to protecting community interests." Her voice remained steady. Her expression remained composed. But the room no longer responded the way it once had. Then the rear door opened. Conversation stopped immediately. A county investigator entered alongside a uniformed sheriff's deputy. Neither appeared aggressive. Neither raised their voice. Their presence alone changed the room. Every head turned. Vanessa stopped speaking mid-sentence. The county investigator approached the front and exchanged a brief conversation with HOA counsel. Several board members visibly stiffened. The sheriff remained near the entrance, observing quietly. Residents watched in complete silence. The investigator then addressed the room. "Certain records are being reviewed in connection with governance and disclosure concerns." The statement was brief, professional, yet the effect was devastating. Social authority shifted instantly. For months, Vanessa had positioned herself as the ultimate authority inside Lake Briar. Now actual institutional authority stood inside the room. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One homeowner asked whether board actions were being suspended. HOA counsel immediately requested a recess. Another resident asked whether legal warnings had been withheld. No answer came. Vanessa attempted to regain control. "People are drawing conclusions without all the facts." Her voice sounded sharper now, less confident, more strained. A resident near the front responded calmly. "Then give us the facts." The room erupted into applause. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to signal that something fundamental had changed. The meeting never recovered. Discussions fractured. Board members argued privately. Residents clustered into groups. HOA counsel spent most of the evening speaking with county officials. By the time Logan stepped outside, rain was still falling across the parking lot. Vanessa remained inside under fluorescent lights, speaking urgently with attorneys. For the first time since this began, she looked genuinely worried. Then Logan's attorney sent a message that made the night even more consequential. The county review had expanded, and tomorrow morning, insurance representatives were scheduled to enter the conversation. The next morning arrived with steady rain and a silence that felt heavier than the storm itself. Fog drifted over the lake and settled along the muddy shoreline while cold wind moved through the wet cedar trees surrounding Logan's property. For the first time in months, he woke up without wondering what Vanessa would do next. The question had changed. Now everyone wanted to know what the county, the insurance carrier, and the HOA board would do next. By mid-morning, the answer began arriving. HOA counsel issued a formal announcement requesting suspension of all enforcement actions related to the dam until the ongoing reviews were completed. Residents received the notice within minutes. Screenshots spread across Lake Briar faster than any newsletter Vanessa had ever written. The $50,000 demand that started everything was effectively frozen. Logan sat on his porch reading the message while rain tapped softly against the metal roof of the maintenance shed. He felt relief, but also exhaustion. The fight had consumed months of his life. It had turned neighbors into critics, friends into observers, and a family legacy into a public controversy. Yet the pressure was finally moving away from him. 2 days later, the board held another meeting. The atmosphere was completely different from the night Vanessa had publicly humiliated him. The room was packed again, but this time the attention was not focused on Logan. It was focused on the board. Several directors announced resignations. Others publicly requested independent governance reviews. HOA counsel confirmed that additional records had been located. County investigators remained involved. Insurance representatives continued reviewing documentation. No dramatic speeches were necessary. The facts spoke for themselves. Then came the moment many residents had been waiting for. The board formally withdrew the fine. No conditions, no negotiation, no face-saving compromise. Withdrawn. Complete applause filled the room. Not because people were celebrating Logan personally. They were celebrating the end of a narrative that had divided the community. Logan remained seated, quiet, calm. But inside he felt something he had not experienced since this started. Dignity returning. Vanessa stood near the front of the room. Gone was the polished certainty that once dominated every conversation. Gone were the confident speeches and carefully managed talking points. She attempted one final explanation. I acted in what I believed were the community's best interests. Nobody argued. Nobody interrupted. The silence that followed was far more powerful. Social authority had completely collapsed. Residents simply looked away. Some checked their phones. Others gathered their belongings. The community had already moved on without her. Weeks later, the development proposal officially disappeared. Investors withdrew interest. Expansion plans ended. The dam remained exactly where it had always been. So did the watershed it protected. More importantly, the truth remained visible. The legal warning existed. The timeline existed. The development discussions existed. The community finally understood what had happened. One calm morning near the end of autumn, Logan walked down to the fishing docks carrying the same coffee thermos he had carried throughout the entire conflict. The rain was gone. Fog slowly lifted from the water. Lake wind moved gently across the surface. Several residents waved from the shoreline. One homeowner who had publicly criticized him months earlier crossed the dock and shook his hand. I should have listened sooner. Logan smiled. Most people were working with incomplete information. The answer surprised even him. The anger had faded. In its place was perspective. Looking back, this was never just a dispute over a dam. It became a lesson about authority, transparency, and accountability. A lesson that communities function best when questions are allowed instead of punished. Social revenge came when the people who once believed the accusations recognized the truth. Legal revenge came when documentation, liability exposure, and independent review replaced manipulation. Emotional healing came when Logan no longer had to defend his family's legacy. Public humiliation came not from punishment, but from seeing influence disappear when trust vanished. The lesson for every viewer is simple. Never confuse confidence with credibility. Never confuse authority with ownership. And never assume that controlling a story means controlling the facts. As the morning fog finally cleared and sunlight touched the lake, Logan stood beside the shoreline listening to nothing but water and wind. The conflict was over. The community was healing. The dam remained. Yet far beyond the eastern tree line, near land once connected to the abandoned project, fresh survey markers had appeared beside a new access road. Someone else was studying the area. Someone with resources. Someone patient. Sometimes justice closes one chapter just in time for the next challenge to begin. Rank the story from 10 to 0. I would love to know what you think.